happy to talk to you about some ideas in working with yourselves and with your clients in a dynamic way that is honoring of the different ways that people who are identified as lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, and queer approach the psyche, or come to understand the psyche, or the psyche comes to understand them in ways particular to how they express their sense of beingness in terms of LGBTQ. And already we're talking about LGBTQ. Sorry to lump all those letters together, but they do actually reference people and different kinds of people. But we're already talking about ways of relating to the psyche that include sexuality, but obviously is not just limited to sexuality, but has to do with the development of personality. That's why the class Theories of Personality, or Personality 1, is so important to open up the understanding of how personality is developed, especially along libidinal lines, because that is going to really help us think more about ourselves, I think, and about the class, and about what does it mean to be working in a dynamic or working with the unconscious in this stage of evolutionary development, which is so important. I can't emphasize, I'm sure you guys know, and I'm sure Matt is spearheading the vital importance of working in a psychodynamic way, which is under attack in all areas, under attack in many, many, many domains, in psychology, in the medical model, many, many fields in queer theory would find our focus on the psyche or on the soul, at best a social construction. So let me back up a little bit. These are some of the things we're going to talk about. I'm going to try and talk about it all in an hour, and I'm also going to want to make sure that you have a chance for questions and answers too. But first I thought I might just name some of the feelings that I'm having, because what is our interest in the unconscious, if it isn't really about the dilemma of being a human being and having feelings and trying to be real. And I should just mention that I'm having a lot of feelings right now. I'm anxious. I mean, an anxiety, like on a scale of 1 to 100, is like maybe 99. Oh. I mean, I don't think it has anything to do with the experience of being with us. I don't think that's what it's about. There's a few stressors. I'm having to give I'm involved in another organization called the Institute for Contemporary Uranian Psychoanalysis, which is the first institute devoted to homosexual self-realization in the world. We've been working this way for a generation, but the institute itself developed formally 5 years ago, and has now instituted a training program, not so much a professional psychological training program, but a training program for those gay activists who want to work on facing and transforming their shadow problem to become more empowered and more alchemized, and synthesizes Freudian and Jungian methodologies. So I'm part of that training group. I'm one of the facilitators, but I also get trained too because of my own limitations around dealing with my material. So I'm thinking about that. That's a 3-hour process. So I'm here, I'm there. I'm also in my early childhood too, right? Because that's, I think, where the anxiety and really the rage comes from. Because I'm not really anxious, I'm enraged, but I have a hard time getting a hold of that. So these ideas are helping me live in a ways that I can make sense out of all these feelings and chaotic material that rise to the surface on a regular basis when I have to show up, when I feel called to show up. And that has more to do with, I'm here now, right? But I grew up in the South Bronx, really lower middle class. My mother, she has some very nice aspects to her, but because there was no money, because my dad was an alcoholic, had some probably personality disorder traits, my mom was real dependent and narcissistic. She was real needy. I was her eldest. It was a Jewish family. Her parents were immigrants. She's a child of the Depression. So she was almost in a kind of typical way, kind of obsessed with me, you know, and I feel her invasiveness. And I think that's where the rage comes from. It's like, leave me alone. Go find your husband. Go do something. You know, it's really, that's where the anxiety is. And my dad is not your typical Jewish father. He's kind of Irish, Depression person, kind of Irish fighter, a real man's man. I'm this little gay kid. He's smoking, drinking. He probably has some little bipolar stuff going on. The household is chaotic. There's lots of fighting. There's lots of screaming. I'm little. I'm a sensitive gay boy. You know, so I can, you know, as I train myself on those memories, I want to tell her to go, leave me the fuck alone. And I want to, even though I'm sort of in love with him because I'm a gay kid, I also want him to die. That's how powerful the rage is. And you could say that's where some of my homophobia is. To be able to differentiate how I'm so angry at him, and yet I'm also clinging to him, and I'm working on that. Right. Okay, we can. Much better. So you know, it would be problematic to just get into a lot of theory, which would be. I want to give you some. Mostly, I really want to give the instructors who teach this class, actually, because I'm concerned that the class is not adequate enough for the teaching of these issues to our students and to our clients. But it would be hypocritical or problematic to get into the theoretical material without giving you a sense, A, as to how I really try to work it in my life and why I think it's so important, and B, just to get grounded, because otherwise I would really be even more dissociated than I am. And I think to try for us teachers and students to try to be with the trauma, and I'm making a big statement here, but it certainly is relevant for working with LGBT clients, but I think for all of us, from a Jungian perspective at least, that the human being has not quite yet developed in a historical phase, because the human being has not developed ongoing relationship with the shadow as a person inside. And to that extent, we're, according to the Jungian framework, barbaric. We're not yet human in that regard. So to try to humanize the problem would then be the way that this material extends beyond just teaching you guys how to be good clinicians. That's important, but is then again a political practice, a spiritual practice, an ethical practice. That's really, really important to name. And then our interest in LGBTQ includes the LGBTQ people, but should extend beyond that, because there are ways all of that material resonates for all human beings, especially in the work of the transference and the countertransference, especially in the work of closeness, which again, probably, at least as far as I understand it, is the main thing that we psychodynamic folks are engaged in, which I think distinguishes us to a certain extent from some of the other methods, which are useful, in my opinion, because I teach them to personality 2, for example. But when harnessed to what it is that we're learning in personality 1, which is the development, it seems to me, through working through trauma and the defenses of closeness and relationship, so that we can use the therapeutic situation to make contact. And how can we make contact if we don't know our unconscious business? So that would be maybe another important thing. And then if we really want to make contact, even if our client isn't necessarily LGBT identified, there might be all kinds of other potentials inside of them and in us. And wouldn't it be nice to make contact in the transference, countertransference, as we're same-sex folk, with our client, and how important that must be. Okay, so anyway, that's kind of the preamble. Let me take a breath. I can feel, you might notice that I can get hysterical. I'm sure my students notice. Yes, you're laughing. They're laughing. I think part of the problem of the hysteria is I couldn't have my feelings as a kid, right? So there's hysteria there, right? With the performance, I have to make you love me, right? There's rage there. I don't want to perform for you. It's so indoctrinated inside of me, though. And I'm enraged about that. I think just that whole problem needs to get dealt with. Also, the problem of relying too much on my thinking function. And I think that's where the hysteria comes from, too. And then the narcissism, right? So I'm trying to talk to you about this stuff, but also in terms of it looking like it's the Doug show, that would be a problem, too. So, you know, how to manage that one. I have to try to be real with you, but I don't really also want to be too narcissistic. I want to also teach you something and give you something to take away. It's more important than my narcissism, or maybe yours too. Okay, so let's see. Let's go into some of the material a little bit and see how we do. not that we have not already got into the material. Let me explain a little bit to you maybe some of the problem in our school and in the LGBT specialization that might help you a little bit. The specific problem that I'm perplexed by and dealing with is that the students who go into the LGBT specialization, some of them, if they haven't had Matt as their personality one teacher, let's say, or someone who's really specifically teaching them application of theory that relates to them psychologically, because there's a hypothesis that we're building on, which is that we're not all exactly the same. We're all the same in many, many ways. We're all human, right? That's where we're the same. But in certain other ways of functioning, and we can go to Plato's symposium and the symposium, The Myth of the Round People, and how there's male-male and male-female and female-female. They get split in half by Zeus. They go looking for their other half. That's the origin of romantic love. We could use that as a metaphor for suggesting that certain psyches are organized differently. And that means that their libidos are organized differently. And if we don't talk about that in class and help those students who are organized like that in class to grasp the material, they may potentially, and you'll see from one of the articles I'm going to talk to you about, experience of re-traumatization. They have no clue that that's going on because it's ubiquitous. It's happening all the time, right? But if you're sensitive and aware of it, it's like, you know, oh, my little gay kid, my little queer kid, my little girl, she doesn't have a soul either. She doesn't have an erotic potentiality or an archetypal potentiality either. Oh, so different things happen in those classes for those students, and I'm beginning, after running this specialization for 6 years, being able to actually name the problem. It took me a long time, due to my own dissociation, to understand and perceive the problem. But then when those students, and let's say, you know, they haven't taken me in Personality 1, where my Personality 1 class already has this material in it, you know, woven more, so I'm still dealing with my internalized homophobia too, in terms of figuring out how to integrate it without feeling ashamed that I'm dominating the class or I'm pushing LGBT issues into the students and it's not fair. You know, there's a lot of toxic shame that comes up in teaching the material about the worthiness of teaching the material. But for those students who don't get this material, it goes in one ear and out the other. And they say to themselves, like a lot of people, I'm not interested in theories of personality that have to do with the unconscious, but just a little bit, you know, but I'm not really that interested because they don't relate to me. So they're, by the time they take an LGBT specialization class, they're not interested in the dynamic approach. For not all, but in some cases. And in some cases, that's a really nice opportunity for the postmodern theories, which are not really necessarily very inclusive of this depth approach, and sometimes virulently antithetical to it. You know, those are easier to learn, easier to apply, easier to use, so then those students become postmodern. And again, another opportunity is lost. So that's very concerning for me. I really, really feel strongly that that needs an intervention. And then also for the rest of you, in terms of working with you, you know, the vast majority of people who seek psychotherapy probably have some, are probably gay, you know, and then they have these issues that are different, Oedipal issues, different emotional triangle issues. You might be a female and they might be a gay male and they might really be much more comfortable with you than a male, and you might not occur to you that you're working out a mother complex problem with them, and they should be more angry at you about that, and you should help them get into their rage about how, I'll talk to you a little bit more about, logically, in a moment, about how that the relations with the feminine can be really, can be a complex, and that a gay man might really need relationship with the masculine. Not that he should leave you, but that he should be able to work out those transference issues. But if you don't have the theoretical heuristic in mind, you won't know to do that, and your supervisor won't know to do that, and that client may be trapped with you to a certain extent, may not know that, but how good would it be to work on that? Same thing with a lesbian client or a trans client. I have a trans client right now with whom I've been working for a year and a few months as a heterosexual man. Just to give you a sense about how deep the problem is. And I'm the LGBT specialization director, right? And this guy, and he had a relationship, and he brought the heterosexual relationship, and we were doing some couples therapy for a while, and it wasn't working. It just didn't occur to me why it wasn't working. It wasn't working. It just, there's no, I like her, but I'm not in love with her. Oh, I have a problem with intimacy, with the typical therapeutic things. So it occurred to me at some point, because I was starting to meditate on it, and I said to him, well, could you tell me, it might be helpful, because we never talk about sex, if you could tell me what some of your masturbation fantasies are like. Okay, wow. That door then opened. And I said, oh no, I'm so sorry. I never asked you that question. And tears. Oh, I didn't know how to talk about it. Was this a trans man? You would never know. I mean, so anyway, that's why it's so important to have these doors, these methods, these ways of thinking that help to open up the door for us and our clients. So some basic working hypotheses that may just be hypotheses and may only be a starting off point and may not be applicable to everyone and may have lots of holes in them, but at least some starting points. Working hypothesis 1, that there is such a thing as lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgendered identity. It does exist. And lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgendered persons organized along their being lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender. Just a working hypothesis. Phenomenologically, it looks like that's the case. But if we don't have that hypothesis that might be, we won't know to look for it. Working hypothesis number 2. In many cases, it may be worthwhile to acknowledge that lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgendered identity is inborn. I don't know if that's biological or spiritual or genetic. There's an article that I submitted for you that is in Trans Emergence that says, there's probably a really good sense that it's biologic and socially constructed, and one shouldn't cancel the other out. But let's not get into that so much, but just assume that is inborn. To be gay is inborn. That's a working hypothesis. In the field of LGBT studies, of which this school's LGBT specialization is a child of, and there are very few LGBT studies programs left in the country. This is one of the last few remaining ones. Most of them have become either gender studies programs or queer theory programs. Queer theory has taken we can get to that in a second. Just the working hypothesis that we're using for the second one is called gay essentialism. That there is an essentiality to being a lesbian, gay, bisexual, trans person. We don't know what we're calling it essence. We're certainly not talking about it in a naive sense as, we're talking probably in a more dynamic sense of feelings, sensations, yearnings, energies, which has very rarely, subtly, nicely defined when people, because the essence versus social constructionist camp is very like black and white. These are more subtle conversations that I think can only be developed if you've done an analysis on yourself, so that you know what, when you say essence, you know what that feels like, and you could differentiate that from intellectualization.